Can you save the galaxy from an impending catastrophe? We're taking a quick peek at Skylar and Plux Adventure on Clover Island. Skylar and Plux Adventure on Clover Island was developed by the Swedish company Right Nice Games and originated as a student project in 2015 just called Adventure on Clover Island. It's heavily inspired by PlayStation 2 titles such as Jak and Daxter, Ratchet & Clank, and Sly Cooper, and uses a vibrant and cartoony art style to evoke the worlds those games created. The project earned top grades for its team and went on to do much more than they expected. During that year's Swedish Game Awards, Adventure on Clover Island picked up the prize for Best Execution in Art as well as Game of the Year. Due to the success of their project, 4 of the students from the original team decided to continue development on the title. Right Nice paired up with Grip Digital to expand the game, adding both Skylar and Plux in place of the original robot main character and releasing the full product in early 2017. The story for Skylar and Plux isn't all that complicated as platform game stories tend to go, and it's told in these odd comic book panels instead of traditional cutscenes. This was obviously done to save money since the developers didn't have the kind of budget a big AAA studio would have, but even so, I found it a bit disconnecting. As it turns out, Skylar is some sort of galactic space thief who gets caught trying to steal some sort of magical thing. And as such, the Evil CRT does some kind of experiments on her to make her a fighting machine while removing parts of her memory. There's a lot of some kind ofs going on and a lot of space magic. It's hard to say what all's changed about Skylar since you never see her before she gets captured, and the most I can figure out is that she now has a robotic arm. Skylar is a silent protagonist, but her new arm, called Arm, is sentient to make up for that. CRT himself is also quite the chatterbox and pops up constantly throughout the game.
What? Bob? You never told me she was gravity-defying.
I'm terribly sorry, sir. I should have known.
It isn't until after the first level, when Skylar escapes CRT and lands on a nearby planet, that she comes across Plux, a bird of some sort who decides to tag along in hopes of saving Clover Island from CRT's disregard for environmentalism. It's not a terrible story, but nothing super unique either, and has a few friendship moments that had me rolling my eyes. Overall, the writing and characters are passable, but they really missed something that helped make those PS2 platformers we remember stand out: personality. Voice work is okay across the board, and while none of them is especially terrible, none of them bring much life to their characters. Games like Ratchet & Clank and Jak and Daxter were full of memorable characters with big personalities that kept players interested in what was going on, as well as providing a good amount of comedic relief. Skylar and Plux tries to do this, but constantly misses the mark, having awkward-sounding characters as well as pop culture references that don't quite fit the world the game's trying to create. The first thing to note while playing the game is that it really is just a good-looking title. From the use of color and lighting to its exaggerated animations, the game has a fantastic presence that does a decent job stacking up to modern games. It obviously doesn't have the budget to match something from a big-time studio, but it's able to use clever tricks to emulate the feeling of something bigger. The only thing that really holds the art design back is the weirdness of its water. Since Clover Island is an island, there's water everywhere in Skylar and Plux, but it looks super flat and gelatinous. It's quite possibly the farthest looking thing from water and completely at odds with the rest of the game. Water is used as a boundary, as Skylar is apparently allergic to it since it kills her automatically. This made a bit more sense in the original version of the game, where the main character was a robot. Skylar may be some kind of cat, alien thing, but while cats don't like water, it doesn't outright kill them, as opposed to a robot being short-circuited by it. Standing water isn't too bad outside of some weird reflections, but waterfalls just look wrong. Gameplay-wise, Skylar Plux wears its inspirations on its sleeve. From environments to mechanics, the title mixes and matches many ideas from a lot of different games. While it emulates these ideas well, it does lack some originality of its own, as almost everything is reminiscent of something else. Basic combat is the most obvious example of this, as it's almost ripped verbatim from the original Jak game. There's the spin move, the dive bomb move, the rolling jump move, and even the little bit of extra airtime you can get from using the spin kick after jumping. The only thing that's really different is Skylar's basic punch attack, since she doesn't dash in the direction she attacks in while using it. While it's good to see that Right Nice didn't copy everything exactly, this particular difference I found is kind of annoying. The game has maybe only 3 kinds of enemies to deal with: little swoomer robots, large stationary cannons, and boxes with machine guns on them. The swoomer robots are the most plentiful enemy you'll face, but I've found these little buggers a lot more difficult to hit than they should be. Without the short dash Jak did for his punch attack, Skylar's punch lacks the range it really needs to consistently deal with enemies. Due to this, I constantly found myself misjudging when to punch, leading to taking damage during enemy encounters that I didn't feel like I should have been taking. None of the enemies are all that complex, and they are really only a threat in groups. Since they are generally easy to deal with, it makes taking damage or dying to these things very disappointing. Instead of feeling like I was outsmarted by the enemy, it just makes me feel kinda stupid. Skylar can take more than one hit before going down for the count, and getting health back is rather simple. Spread throughout the game are red crystals, which not only act as a kind of currency, but will also heal Skylar when they're collected. They're mostly found just lying about or within stacks of crates, but they can be dropped by defeated enemies. These crystals can be used to open cages and free creatures called Loa, and freed Loa can then be traded in for more hit points that you can use to get more crystals, to get more cages, to get more hit points. It's a nice cycle. Just like any platform game, Skylar Plux has pits that will kill you if you fall into them, except maybe they won't. As long as you have more than one hit point before falling to your doom, you'll teleport back to the platform you fell off of, just having taken damage instead of being killed. Run out of health though, and it's back to the last checkpoint, wherever that is. This kind of system is both good and bad, as players aren't fully punished for misjudging a jump, but checkpoints are infrequent, meaning you have to replay a good bit to get back to where you were. What makes this worse is the game's collision and platforming. For the most part, Skylar Plux is a game with good bones and some solid core mechanics. Its platforming feels pretty good, but I constantly found myself undershooting my jumps. It's very difficult to describe, but something about the game's platforming makes it hard to pin down exactly where Skylar is in the world in comparison to everything else. I constantly found myself just barely missing platforms, and the game doesn't have any kind of edge-grabbing mechanics to save yourself in these situations. Missing a platform didn't always cause me to die though, as many times I was able to land on some piece of geometry I don't think I was supposed to be able to. Having an emphasis on collectibles led me to want to look everywhere I could to see if I could find something. But most of the time I found dead ends, and the inconsistent collision doesn't really help. Throughout the game, Skylar will also come across different gadgets she can use to solve puzzles scattered around Clover Island. While there are only 3 of them, a jetpack, a time distortion device, and a magnet, each one is useful for both traversing the environment as well as aiding in combat. The jetpack can be used to jump higher and farther, but also lets you roll to avoid enemies, while the time distortion device slows down spinning platforms and enemies alike. The magnet, in my opinion, is the most interesting, since it can be used to activate specific platforms, as well as turning enemies against each other and going bowling. The magnet also allows Skylar to grab projectiles out of the air and fire them back at enemies. Overall, Skylar and Plux Adventure on Clover Island is a good game, but lacks the polish it really needs. Everything from combat to platforming is close but not quite as solid as it needs to be for the kind of 3D character platform game Right Nice wanted to make, and the game overall can't shake the feeling of a student project to me. The short length doesn't help with that either, but even with its problems, I can still say that I really enjoyed what I played of it. Right Nice has a good idea of how to make this kind of game, but they just aren't there yet. From its lackluster writing and voice acting to weird-looking water and collision issues, the game isn't perfect, but it does make me rather interested to see where Right Nice goes from here. Skylar Plux is available on both Steam and GOG for $15 US, which is a price point I've read mixed things about. Some people think it's too much for how short the game is, while others think it's okay. Either way, I found the game rather enjoyable, and if you're a fan of 3D character platform games, I think you will as well. Thanks for watching. Please let me know what you think about the game or this video in the comments section. I'm MegapieMan. I'll talk to you guys later. Want to see more quick peeks? Click on the video on the left for Strafe, a roguelike first-person shooter with a heavy 90s theme. Or click on the video on the right for Little Nightmares, an atmospheric platformer about a young girl trapped in a world full of monsters.